And so another one that he saw is actually the coming of steamship in Singapore. Okay? Of course, as you may know, when steamship appeared in this region, there was a lot of anxiety within the local population, be it the Malays and Chinese, and Indians, who thought that that ship could be manned by some invisible force. Abdullah said, no, it's not. It's by the virtue of technical progress, by technology that allowed it, this ship, big ship, right, to move using the power of steam. And of course that's very revolutionary, because ships in this part of the world, in Asia, are all wind driven. So that you can see. Then Abdullah, of course, thanks to his European friends, he was able to see this. And of course, before I go to Hikat Abdullah in 1849, which he wrote, but in 1843 he wrote this Cerita Kapal Asap Api. This is where he went up to the stories, right? And he jotted down what is actually how the ship is working, right? And this is, I think, a very important point to make. He's not afraid of new technology. He's embracing it very well, and he wants to know how it works. So he come on board of the ship. He jot down what he observed, and he want to explain how the ship works. So he says something like this. So if anything is lacking in its composition or its language, okay, when he wrote this, I ask forgiveness and beg to be corrected. Okay. Of course, he's not saying that he knows everything, but he wanted to write something to explain to the local population. Okay, but this is in 1843. I think it's a very short, it's a short prose, but I find it's although a bit dry, but just to show that Abdullah is very perceptive, But in 1849, this is where I think he lamented in his autobiography about how actually his friends did not believe him, right? I was trusting only rumor, his friend said, not yet having seen what they look like. In spite of this, I used to tell my friends about the skill and ingenuity of the white man, the things I've seen and heard intelligent Englishmen discuss until I came to the subject of steamship. Then my friends became angry and argued with me, calling me a liar and saying, you always magnify the prowess of the English and tell us the most impossible things. And some of them ridicule me for telling them that the steamship really existed. It existed. That's the reason why Abdullah go on board of the stories and try to explain. And when steamship appear in this region, one of the early buyers who want to own steamship are actually Malay rulers. They want to buy steamship as part of their transportation and collection. Okay. And another episode is when this is Abdullah. I think this is where Abdullah is very sharp at looking at the ploy that the Temenggung and the ploy of Fakuha and Raffles, who wanted Temenggung to move out of the Singapore River. The art house today, the old Parliament of Singapore, they're the site. This is actually the former site of the residence of Temenggung, right? So he was asked to leave that area to be resettled in one area which he can choose, which is actually, if you look at some treaties, then the Teluk Belanga was given to the Temenggung family, and of course the Temenggung, when it was first brought up to him, the Temenggung was not very keen and something like this. Tengku, this is what Raffles is saying. I noticed that your compound is very narrow and cannot hold many people because it is hemmed by its people living on both sides of it. Moreover, it's difficult for your women folk to go about the roads because the place is right in the middle of a cosmopolitan district, which is actually the British wanted the Malays or the Temanggung out of the town area, right? An area to be designated for European quarters. Yeah. In my opinion, it would be be a good thing for you to look for a place a little further away so that you and your household can all be on your own. Sorry, not own, yeah? Not mixed up with other people. It's a very strange thing, you know. I don't think that Temanggung have a problem of mixing with others. Yeah? Please think that there is a suitable place and let me know. Then I will provide the expenses of clearing the site and will also pay a reasonable amount as compensation for the houses of those who move from here to a new place. The Temanggung replied, very well, sir. I will think where there is a good place. I believe that Teluk Blangah will be the best. Yeah. But wait until I have been to see it. Okay? Then after Raffles said, and Raffles and Farquhar returned home. Now, in my opinion, this is where Abdullah comes in. Now, in my opinion, those words of Mr. Raffles must have sounded sweet to their ears. Sorry, not ours. To ears. That is, when he told the Temanggung to look for a place where he and his womenfolk would live in comfort, and where he said that he would pay the expenses of making the new site and compensation for the breaking up of the houses, and all the advice he gave. All this was, in the words of the Malays, putting bananas into a man's mouth while sticking thorns into his back. Abdullah did not need to say much except to use a Malay proverb. Yeah, a Malay proverb something like mulut disuat pisang, buntut disumbat duri. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I don't know I can't remember the exact. Yeah, but this is a very powerful. Right? Can you imagine this imageries? Yeah, so in a way, it tells about how he see the attitude, the character of Raffles, and Farquhar. All right, and this is another one of in his work that Abdullah mentioned about how he was very critical about the Malay rulers, and this is what he gave his reader, right? The reason for him to be critical and very upfront with what he believes in. And he says this first, so that the younger generation may learn about events of the past. This is the reason why he spent time writing. Second, to furnish examples and illustration of activities, the behavior, the character, the industry, and the diligence of great men whose names are mentioned in it, and of great affection which their names are recalled by those who have lived after them. Third, so that generation may shun evil things of this world and the next, as seen in the behavior and the character of wicked men whose names are also mentioned, and may realize in what bitterness and contempt such men are held by people now living. Fourth, as a guide to all those who are starting their study of the Malay language, that they may gather something of its syntax, its system of affixation and sentence construction, its reduplication, its euphony, and so on, and also that they may be made aware of its idiom, proverbs, poetry, and its similes, metaphor, and used by the Malays. Why is that so? Because Abdullah thinks that whatever he wrote is a standard, decent language construction, and no surprise, because of slightly more discipline, his work being used in Malay schools in the early periods of the colonial, in the Malay schools during the colonial period. Yeah, so that's one thing that we need to remember. Okay, Apart from, of course, Abdullah, of course, mentioned about if you want to improve your Malay, best if you read Malay literature. This is what Abdullah says, yeah. And amongst the literature that he mentioned is actually Sejarah Melayu. He said that Sejarah Melayu is a very wonderful Malay expressions, right? And I think nobody can refute that. Well, anyway, so this is Abdullah. I just want to give you a glimpse of how others look at him. Yeah. Butterworth, yeah, the Governor General, Street Settlement, mentioned that he's enlightened Muhammadan, right? Okay, he was a protege of great statesmen of the Sanford Raffles. But quite interestingly, if you check whether Raffles had really mentioned highly about Abdullah, or even mentioned him at all, right? So that's another twist that one has to look at. You know, the hierarchy between a colonial and an indigenous person. We know that Winstead, who wrote the history of classical Malay literature, has always give a high appraisal to Abdullah. Yeah, but the appraisal is very much what I call it, due to his what I call it, mixed ancestry, yeah, which is typical of Winstead to harp on this. Every time when he sees very interesting work, he will attribute it to not of the local dynamics, but always the bloodline of the writer, right? Which is actually typical of that colonial Orientalist scholarship. Zaba mentioned as few others, yeah. Zaba is one of the prominent scholar in Malay studies when it first started in Singapore back in 1955. Muhammad Taib Osman also, but generally since then, since R.O. Winstead, Zaba, and Taib Osman mostly give emphasis of Abdullah from its literary standpoint, yeah. Except when we look at Sharuddin Ma'ruf, when he studied Abdullah in a more, I would say, more critical way, yeah, where he saw Abdullah's ideas is very much reformistic. I will want to read here. His work is the earliest Malay social criticism based on Islamic values, and is critical of reformist thinking, stand out in glaring contrast to the ritualistic and dogmatic religious life of his time. His attitude and religion was free from the influence of Malay feudalism and was based mainly on living interpretation of Islam. The notion of social justice, humanity, rationalism, individualism, equality, freedom, reform, progress, human development, leadership, as understood and advocated by Islam, underlie his work. Yeah? If you read his Kisah Pelayaran Abdullah, Kisah Pelayaran Abdullah, one of the work that he mentioned to be read by Malay rulers and others are actually Tajus Salatin, a very important book of ethics, which is circulated very well in this region, written in 1603 in Aceh, written in Malay, and that is a book of ethics. Has a very strong emphasis on justice, rationality, and the importance of knowledge, yeah, ilmu, yeah, as part and parcel of making a better person and a better society. Right? Again, yeah, Abdullah will not be able to read all this, but just to give you a showcase, yeah. But this is where I think it's important to be to know that Abdullah, it's not all high praise about Abdullah. Abdullah is very much accused of being a betrayer, yeah. Especially the rightist nationalists who said that he's just a colonial lackey, right? That he looked down on the Malays and so on and so forth. Yeah. But I think if you read based on my reading, I'm not able to spend time. If let's say we are given a chance just to read one text, text, right? We can spend 3 hours just to read his text. Then, yeah, we can see the kind of position that Abdullah, of course, not free from British colonial influence, but to say that Abdullah is just thinking and writing for the colonial, I think it's not a fair position, right? Abdullah said, they call me Padri Abdullah, which they thought was a discreditable and shameful designation. They revile me because I stood well with the white people and considered it sin that I should teach these men our language and help to translate the New Testament into Malay, right? And he had a strong relation with Kesbury. Kesbury is the one that ran a missionary Malay school, right, in Mount Zion. His son actually went to that school, and that's the reason why the son was then later being absorbed into the Johor Sultanate's government, because by virtue that Temengung's sons was also educated in Padri Kesbury's school. Yeah. In conclusion, yeah, his overall contribution can be seen in literature and culture, social and cultural commentaries. He advocated reform. He documented life and events of early Singapore. I'm not able to say about the fire of the Great Fire that took place in Kampung Glam, yeah, Syair Kampung Glam Terbakar, right, which actually he depicted, I think it's a very interesting documentation. And also a murder case in Singapore, Cerita Sabar Ali, and few others, yeah. And also his observation about, I think this is an important point, his observation about the slave trade in Singapore, and he rejected it. In fact, he went to ask Raffles why these things have not been think about thoroughly. And Raffles was saying something that, well, we will look into this. Can you imagine someone like Abdullah saying that, and he was disgusted at the miseries of the slave which he saw in Singapore. Yeah, this was the same period when other continents were still rife with the problem of slavery, and here we have Abdullah in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, yeah, that was critical of slavery, yeah. And of course, opium smoking, which you saw, which is very prevalent among the Chinese coolies, and and he knew that this thing must be put to an end. Yeah. Not only his documenting efforts are extensive, Abdullah's ideas are marked by critical insight and even empathic perception. He was man who feared no change and innovation, sociologically perceptive and historically sensitive, and he's the visionary at the same time, right? While denouncing injustices and oppressive rule of Malay feudalism, Abdullah was expecting its imminent collapse if no reform there was no reforms, especially amongst the elite, ensuring the welfare of the people, especially in providing education for the people. As a language teacher, Munsyi was particularly critical of the neglect of learning of the Malay language, and not just that, Malays learning English also, not simply as a social capital, but also as a vehicle for developing and transmitting technology and knowledge in society, right? And this is what Abdullah has to say about the beauty, the importance of language, right? I just want you to take a look and reflect upon it. And this is, if I did not say this is written by Abdullah, you wouldn't believe that it's actually written by Abdullah, right? A great nation necessarily has a fine language, which all matters pertaining to this world and the next can be given expression. Such a nation has words to describe activities and to evoke any kind of concept. It can regulate its life through the medium of language, affording an opportunity for men to gain untold wealth, honor, and power. And such a language is. It is the language that brings Abdullah to the fore. And he was able to become the cultural broker between the indigenous population and the white traders and settlers, white colonists. It was the language that would enable Abdullah to read and to write. And it's actually the language that made Abdullah, via his writing, that we remember him today. Yeah? On that note, thank you so much. Yeah, and this is the last that he wrote, posthumously mentioned and published, yeah, in 1850s. And Abdullah died on his pilgrimage to Mecca when a few days after he reached the holy city, and he wrote in a very moving sha'r. He says this: "As I entered into this exalted city, I became oblivious to all the pleasures and joys of this world. It was as if I had acquired heaven and all that it holds. I uttered 1,000 prayers of thanks to the most exalted God. Thus I have forgotten all the hardship and torments along my journey. For I have yearned and dreamed after the Baitullah for many months." Baitullah means the holy sites, Mecca and Medina. Yeah. So, friends, if you look at this wonderful man, I think we have a lot of things to read and learn. And if you want to follow up the readings, this is where I always like to promote books, right? I don't work for NLB, but NLB has a very good collection that you can borrow, or at the reference section. These are the Malay version. There are English translated version, of course. Autobiography of Munsyi Abdullah, easily you can get. There are some academic studies, yeah, by Sanjay Krishnan, by of late this year, Professor Hadijah Rahmat, and few others. All right. On that note, thank you so much. Back to you, Fadli.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Azhar, for delivering a very interesting topic for tonight's session. Gifted in languages, I think Abdullah mastered Arabic, Tamil, Hindi, and Malay. I think he was also known for his work as a teacher, interpreter, and also a writer.
Yeah.
So I think for his book, I think the Hikayat Abdullah, or also known as Story of Abdullah, published in 1849, it became an important source to understand the social history of the 19th century Singapore. Rightly so. So he was also often called or referred to as a father of modern Malay literature for his early literary contributions. So, dear friends, we will now proceed to the Q&A segment, and I would like to invite everyone to pose your respective questions. So, before we do so, kindly use the Q&A function in Zoom. And for those tuning in via FB Live, you may post your questions in the comments section. Just a general rule of thumb, please be respectful in your questions and kindly introduce yourself if you are using a nickname. Thank you. So with this, let me just check Dr. Azhar question. I think we have 2 questions. Yeah, I think the first one under the Q&A, Dr. Azhar, we have, I think, first by Rusihan.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay, Rusihan, maybe that's a PDF copy. I think no, he's asking the presentation slide. Yeah. Let the technical part of the MHF to deal with this. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Rusihan. Okay, we have another question.
Yeah, by another, I think, anonymous.
Anonymous one. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a particular controversy regard to Prophet Said Nagib rejecting Abdullah Munsyi as being father of modern Malay literature, if I'm not wrong, from Said name Hamzah Fansur. Okay, all right. So actually, it's not that he rejected Abdullah, yeah, because Abdullah was named by in Western scholarship in Malay studies, yeah, which is first started by the British bureaucrat scholars, yeah, like R. Winstead and few others, yeah. If you look at their position, is basically that Abdullah, they see Abdullah as the father of modern Malay literature, the father of modern Malay literature, meaning that he heralded this new era. Yeah, it's the end of the pujangga and the coming of. Yeah, of a new era. And of course, they backed it up because of Abdullah's very much, given the support of the British, and he's very much embraced, Western ideas. Okay, they kind of downplay Abdullah's Islam, but Abdullah's pro-British attitude. Yeah, so in that way, within that Malay studies, during the colonial period, have that impression that Abdullah is the person. Yeah, and of course it continued, but even by Muhammad Taib Osman and a few others. So the question has never been written carefully. Right? Of course, Said Nagi, whose thesis, a PhD thesis, was of Hamzah Mansuri, and he did it in SOAS, and it's a very good thesis, of course, and projecting that the tradition of scholarship, of rational thinking, was part and parcel of the Islamic tradition, which can be well documented in the works of Hamzah Mansuri, right? So that's the position. In fact, it says that that modernity, how you define it, it had started very much way before the British. Okay, so he's not saying that Abdullah is the one, but he's, I think, trying to say that no, he's not saying that Hamzah Mansuri is one. He's trying to say that we cannot be just captivated by this British what they call it, formulation that Abdullah should be the father of Malay literature. In fact, if you look at my position just now, right, my talk, I had never said Abdullah as father of Malay literature, because my kind of training in Malay studies have never take such position, right? We don't need to look for father here, father there, mother here, mother there. We don't need to, right? Everyone have its role, right? But because of the whipping up that Abdullah is the person, I think it caused another group rejecting it. And of course, we know that are the groups that rejected Abdullah, not just because of Abdullah's position being whipped up by the Orientalist scholars, but also because of his association with Christianity. Right? I mean, with his translation of the some parts of the New Testament. So that caused some kind of disagreement. Yeah. But other than that, I don't see much of it was just then, but of course maybe followers of the mainstream and dominant scholarship always want to defend their teachers' position and so on. So we can see here today, on the one hand, some people still saying that Abdullah is, and on the other hand, it's Hamzah Mansuri. Yeah, right. That's my.
Yeah, Dr. Azhar, we have one question from Facebook. It's by Wan Wei Xian. He is, I think, asking about whether there is a translation of the Bible, his translation of the Bible available online. So what Wei Xian said that he's a religion scholar who would be interested in taking a look at the NT translation. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure about that. Yeah, Hussein. Sorry for that. But most of the work that Abdullah has translated, the one that I have documented, have been well put in the bibliography by scholars. The one that I give the list is actually I took it from other scholars who have done a good list, among others Amin Sweeney. I'm not aware of the entire Bible and the entire New Testament, but the epistles, based on this. If it's published work, I'm not sure, but if it's a microfilm, right, or if it's digitized, right, there's highly likely that you can trace the sources, right? I'm sorry that I'm not able to answer that fully. I mean, it's quite interesting. I have we had a student at Malay Studies, Reverend Malcolm Tan, who did on the Christian works, in Malay. Among others, he looked at the works of Abdullah. Maybe one day I will check with Reverend Malcolm Tan again, and then Hushan, you can email me if you can check at my department's website, trace my email, and then from there we can communicate. Right? If I can help you to link up, maybe that would be the case. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Azhar, we have another question in the Q&A section. So by Mr. Fadzil Al-Habshi. So his question is Assalamualaikum and good evening. I'm Fadzil from Johor. May I know why did Abdullah translate the Bible into Malay, and what was his justifications on this?
Oh yeah, okay. So when he was translating it, right? Remember, during that time, of course, we know that the efforts by Christian missionary wanting to convert the population, we don't deny that. In fact, we no need to be apologetic about that. We know, yeah, but there was never a successful Christian evangelization among the Malay population. But what is actually also important for us to see that the Malay translated Bible is needed for the usage of non-Malays who were converting to Christianity, namely the Peranakan and the Peranakan have various Peranakan, right? There's Chinese Peranakan and there's the Indian Peranakan, right? So we're not talking about Peranakan Muslim, we're talking about Peranakan like the Chitis and few others who converted to Christianity, right? So if these are the group, that they target also, and you know that Malay was the lingua franca at that time. The Chinese, the Peranakan population that have settled here did not use Mandarin, nor you convert them using English because they have not gone to English schools. Yeah, so Malay was then very much the lingua franca. Yeah, and it was needed to be used. Yeah, in providing the religious service. I mean, you have a local audience. So if you look, for example, if you look at early Christian schools, and if you look at the girls, who came to the school, they are wearing kebaya, they're wearing the ligaments. But if you look carefully, they are Chinese, mostly Chinese girls and Indian girls, who we can assume are already converted to Christianity, and they are their language is Malay. Yeah, so that was the purpose of apart from the Malay language in the Bible to convert the Malays, which is a project which is which is actually a full-time project. There were few only I think about 5 or 6 conversion recorded, and none actually able to form a specific definite Malay Christian community. None. There was never one before, right? You can't find a Malay church, for example. Let's say you can find, let's say in Java, for instance, or in other parts of the Nusantara. But in the case of Peninsula, even in Singapore, in Malacca, the Christianity was very long established in Malacca since, but there was very much there was hardly any Malay Christian community. That already shown that the evangelical work, in fact, if you read the work of Hadijah Rahmat, in fact, the Christian missionary overall later on closed shop actually, and then they focus their missionary to China because they don't get caught with they don't get any much conversion here. All right. Okay.
Okay, Dr. Azhar, I think we have a couple of questions
Uh-huh.
under the Q&A. Yeah.
Okay. Said to be critical of Malays. Yeah, this is from Dr. Nur Shahril. Yeah. Munsyi was generally said to be critical of the Malays, but you seem to have different and kinder view. Well, kinder in the sense that, of course, as a man, yeah, of eloquence, a man of scholarship, Abdullah has, of course, its strength and weaknesses. Okay, I would see that his social criticism is actually a very powerful one, right? Against all the description about his negativities. But if you look, for example, that Abdullah being seen as humiliating the Malays with the words bodoh, kotor, and so on. Yeah, that's very much common in use. But in no way he's saying that that's innate, right? Or this is something which is to be associated with the Malays throughout. Yeah, unlike the colonial position, yeah, of certain myth that later they created of indolent indigenous Malays and so on. Let me give you an example here. Abdullah went to Pahang, and then he saw many things in Pahang, which he saw that something is wrong in Pahang. So what he saw is that he began to think. He said that is it possible? Is it because Pahang is such a demise state by virtue because of the land is so dry and not fertile? He said cannot be, because when I said no, it's very green, with with a fertile land. Is it because, he asked, that the country is being attacked by foreign invaders? He said that cannot be, because there's no country in the world that collapsed because of being attacked by foreign invasion. He said cannot be, and it's not the case of Pahang. Could it be that the reason why Pahang was in the state of demise because of the people are all lazy, right, or not hardworking? He said not possible. He said there's no country in the world that everyone is lazy. There are lazy people but it cannot be the whole country. So Abdullah was saying that what's the reason why this economic demise in the state of Pahang? He said that there's to be one reason. The reason is actually the sheer misrule and injustices, where the people no longer have the incentive to work, to create surplus in their production, and therefore not able, right, to go out of that state of poverty and the state of decadent, wretched life in that sense. Yeah, so I think that's in a way Abdullah is not associating to Malay culture or Malay people. It is, remember, Abdullah never studied sociology. He's saying that there is a factor here, a factor of the injustices, yeah, of the ruling class. Yeah, I think this is a very powerful message. Yeah, and I think we need to carefully. Yeah? And Abdullah wrote this when he was out of Pahang, and because he was not happy. What's the reason of the state of condition in Pahang? I think this is something which made me see the strength of one after another, right? That Abdullah was able to explain. Yeah, for example, in terms of why the neglect of language. He's not just describing, but he was wanting to know what's the reason. Yeah, and because if, let's say, you look at just read his work and then you point at him and say, well, Abdullah is this and that, I think we have not been fair to him to read him in a fuller context. Yeah, okay. All right, that's my yeah. I have a lot other explanation, but I think I just give a short one. Yeah? From Iza says this. Yeah. Singapura negeri baru, Tuan Raffles menjadi raja, bunga melur cempaka biru, kembang sekuntum di mulut naga. Yeah, Abdullah's pantun is loaded with poetic expression. Yeah, I wish I'm the expert in this. Yeah, Iza, I'm not able to know what is that cempaka, bunga melor, cempaka biru. Cempaka biru is out of this world. I've not seen. Cempaka normally putih, right? Yeah. Does it really exist? No, it might not be. Yeah, it is something strange. Yeah, or maybe rare. I wouldn't know. Right? We need to ask some senior cikgu. Yeah, but kembang sekuntum di mulut naga, which is actually a very subtle way of putting that. It flourish, but is in the mouth of a dragon, which is actually something like, well, remember guys, this white man comes, it's nothing for free, right? They will get back to you, just like in the position, in a precarious position in the dragon's mouth, yeah. A flower blooming in the mouth of a dragon. Yeah? Okay. All right. That's from Iza. Yeah. Who else? Oh, just now it was a question from Cik Zainal. All right. Thank you, Cik Zainal. Hafiz says here, why Abdullah did not translate the Quran to Malay? Well, you see, the Quran is not something like already there is a taboo amongst religious traditionalists to translate Quran. They only call for tafsir. Okay? In Southeast Asia, there are Malay works who already done on tafsir of Quran, in the sense that tafsir means rendering of readings, interpretation. There's no direct translation that you see today. Only later on in the 20th century that ulama agreed. Yeah? Even in Java, they were called to translate Quran into Javanese. Right? Raden Kartini called for it. Yeah, and Kiai Saleh Darat was one who translated. I think he even translated some parts of it, not the entire Quran, into Javanese. Yeah. So during Abdullah times, which is slightly earlier than, of course, decades earlier than Kartini, there was no translation of such. What Abdullah is trying to say that the Malays need to understand what they read from the Quran. Yeah. In other words, their mastery of the Quran must come side by side with their mastery of the Arabic language, the meaning to it, not just its recitation. In that sense, yes, Abdullah want Quran to be understood, but not in the translated version, as compared to the Bible, because the Bible have no prohibition to be translated to other vernaculars, but not in the case of Quran. Yeah. Okay. This one we need to remember, because it's not something that today we can pick up Quran, and then we can have a Malay version or other version. When Quran was translated into English by who's this, the famous translator? Yeah, sorry, I can't remember. Yeah. Yusuf Ali, Yusuf Ali. Even then, there was a backlash amongst some conservative group that claimed that Quran cannot be translated. Yeah, Mahmud Yunus translated Quran in the 1930s into Malay. Yeah, that also received some opposition. Okay.
Dr. Azhar, we have a couple of questions, if you're okay to take, because I think we are slightly
okay. I take only one more. Can I take only one more?
Okay. Okay, Dr. Azhar, this is by Sandi Kama via our, I think, the Facebook Live. Is it possible that Abdullah is a pioneer of Malay reformists? His views seem to be very different from Raja Ali Haji, although both of them are from the same era. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say because Abdullah lived in a period where there is a lot of interaction, more robust development taking place, right? And that calls for, within the community, the literati to speak up, right? Abdullah is not the only one who spoke up. There was another man by the name of Tuan Simi. Although Tuan Simi only produced 2 or maybe 3 syair. But other than that, we don't know about Tuan Simi, right? Who is also a contemporary of Abdullah. Slightly earlier than Abdullah, there was this man in Batavia who wrote in Malay also, by the name of Muhammad al-Misri, right? Also in the line of talking about reforms. Yeah, so it's quite interesting that in areas of polity where there is a kind of political freedom, there's a lot of economic transaction, a kind of a flow of ideas. You can see the emergence of very interesting men. I mean, sociologically speaking, it allows for such men or women, if the case may be, right, to emerge and to become the critical voice in society. Yeah, so Abdullah is one of them. Okay? And I would say Abdullah had that reformist stance in terms of, say, language, religion, yeah, and of course other kind of superstitions. Yeah, and he rejected all these beliefs in hantu, believe in all these momos and pawaks. You know, he was basically a man who wanted to be firm in that in the rational order. Yeah, whereas Raja Ali Haji, he emerged from a milieu of what we call a kraton, yeah, istana, yeah, very much established, parts of ruling class, right? And he was more more interested in the preservation, for example. Yeah, I give you a contrast here. Abdullah say, when you write a Malay letter, short, sharp, be clear, and most important, your content must have substance. Whereas in Raja Ali Haji, you can see a difference. Raja Ali Haji wants all the decorum, all the all the stylistics to be incorporated in the writing of Malay letter. So you can see a totally different personality, same period, but because of different ideological milieu, one in Singapore and one in Riau, which is actually not far away, but of a different what I call social and political demands of the day, which make them totally different. One is in power, Raja Ali Haji, very established, wanting a continuity, wanting a more royal eloquence, royal grandiose, right? And keeping up to the to keeping up with the tradition. Although we can say that Raja Ali Haji also, at the end of his life, yeah, especially when his work, this work called Tamarat al-Muhimmah. In Tamarat al-Muhimmah, he was writing about the ordering of a Malay state, right, with the functioning of a court system where justice or adil must prevail, and among others, corruption or rashwah must be mitigated. Right? I think that's that part of the reformist, so-called reformist Raja Ali Haji, I think comes slightly later. Other than that, I think Raja Ali Haji is still very much a status quoist by virtue of his position as a ruling class, the member of the ruling class, as compared to Abdullah, who is a more freer man in the Strait settlement. Yeah? That's my answer to it.